The freight depot at Haverton Junction was the best place in the valley to film anything, because no one ever checked it after dark. Petra Mwangi knew this the way she knew most useful things, not from being told, but from being 12 years old and paying attention. The depot sat at the eastern edge of town, where the Magrail spur curved away toward the mountain pass, and after the last outbound freight car cleared at 9:15, the place belonged to whoever showed up with a hand torch and a reason. Tonight her reason was the comet, or what she had told her friends was a comet. There were 4 of them: Petra with the camera, Yusuf carrying the tripod, Rena holding the angle chart they had printed from the astronomy site, and Dav, who was mostly there because he had nothing better to do and owned a good torch. They had set up on the loading platform's upper deck, above the long row of empty freight bays, with a clear line of sight to the northeast sky, where the comet's tail was supposed to be visible for exactly 18 minutes starting at 9:42. It was 9:39 when the lights came down. Petra saw them first because she was looking through the camera. A cluster of amber-white points, moving too fast and too low for any aircraft she had ever seen, dropping out of the overcast to the north at a steep angle, and then leveling off sharply above the tree line. She kept the camera rolling. Her thumb found the zoom control on instinct. "What is that?" Rena said, not as a question. "Quiet." Petra tracked the lights. There were 3 distinct objects, 2 moving in coordinated arcs and 1 dropping faster than the others, alone, at the wrong angle. The 2 coordinated ones swept east in a wide banking turn and climbed back into the overcast. They moved like they were looking for something. The 3rd one came down into the freight yard. There was no crash, no explosion, no dramatic column of smoke. It came down the way a bird comes down to roost deliberately, at a controlled angle, settling behind the long row of storage containers in the lower yard with a sound like air pressure releasing, a soft hydraulic exhale. Then nothing. The yard was dark and quiet. "We should go," Dav said. "We should see," Petra said, and she was already climbing down from the upper deck. Yusuf followed because he always followed Petra into things he later regretted. Rena came because standing alone on the upper deck seemed worse than going. Dav came last, muttering, which meant he was coming. The lower yard was a grid of storage containers and freight pallets, lit by the dim blue-white of the perimeter lighting that ran on a timer and never quite reached the middle of the yard. Petra moved down the central lane with the camera recording, keeping the lens pointed toward the far end where the containers stood 3 rows deep. The sound had come from there. She counted the rows as she walked. 1, 2, she stopped. There was something between the 2nd and 3rd rows. Not something large, smaller than she expected. It was crouched at the base of a container, pressed against the corrugated metal as though it was trying to disappear into it, and in the pale perimeter light she could see the shape of it, thin, long-limbed, wrong in the specific ways that made her understand completely what she was looking at. Not human-shaped. Close, in the way that a drawing of a human by someone who had never seen one is close. The proportions almost right, the angles slightly off, the hands wrong by 1 finger on each side. Its body was covered in something that was not quite a suit and not quite skin, dark gray, form-fitted, and at its chest and 1 shoulder the material was damaged, a long tear on the left side, sealed badly with something dark and congealed. It was looking at her. The eyes were the same amber-white as the lights she had tracked through the camera, and they were enormous, taking up a third of the face, and they were not frightening. They were petrified. The way a deer looks when the headlights come, not threatening, not calculating, frozen, afraid. Petra stopped walking. She held her hand out to the side, the gesture she used with her friends when she meant stop, don't move. Behind her she heard them halt. She kept the camera on it. The alien's chest was moving in short, rapid cycles, breathing hard, or the equivalent. The damaged side of its torso was favoring itself, and now she could see that one of the long legs was braced wrong, the lower joint held at an angle that looked forced. It was hurt, and the two lights that had swept east and climbed back into the overcast, those had been looking for it, not looking for the freight yard, looking for this specific thing here in the dark. "It's running from them," Yusuf said very quietly beside her ear. "Yeah," Petra said. "From the other ones." "Yeah." She thought about what she knew about Earth's monitoring systems, because every kid who had grown up in the last 40 years knew the basics. The orbital networks, the atmospheric warships, the scan arrays that covered every approach corridor, all of it had been built because things came back, and Earth had decided to be ready when they did. The systems were automated and comprehensive, and she had done well on her school project about them because she actually found it interesting. By now, she figured, every piece of the monitoring infrastructure within 200 kilometers already knew exactly where this alien was. The question was what they were going to do about it. She had maybe minutes. "Rena," she said, "the angle chart. Does it have the emergency contact code on the back?" A pause, pages shuffling. "Yeah, ED Watch Regional Line." "Call it. Tell them we're at Haverton Junction Lower Freight Yard, and there's a wounded alien that is not being aggressive and appears to be hiding from something else." Another pause. "Just call them. Just call them." She heard Rena step back and start talking into her comm. Petra lowered the camera slightly, so she was looking at the alien over the lens rather than through it. It had not moved. It was watching her with those massive amber eyes, and the fear in its posture was so readable that she felt something strange and uncomfortable in her chest. The same thing she felt watching the documentaries about the old bombardment years when the archival footage showed the aftermath. Not pity exactly, something closer to the feeling of recognizing a mistake. This creature was scared of what it had found here. All of them were, apparently, the ones that had left it behind included. She crouched down, bringing herself to its level. "We're getting you help," she said, keeping her voice even. "The kind that won't hurt you." It made a sound, low, resonant, in a register she felt more than heard. Not a threat sound, something more like a question. "I don't know if you understand me," she said, "but I'm not going to let them take you." By them, she meant the two lights that had abandoned it. She was not sure why that felt like the right commitment to make to a stranger in a freight yard, but it did. The ED Watch response team arrived in 11 minutes, 2 ground vehicles, and a single atmospheric escort that held at 500 meters, and circled once before pulling to a hover. The ground team was 4 people in civilian liaison gear, not armor, which Petra later learned was protocol for low-threat unknowns. You send the face that says we are not here to fight you. The lead person was a woman in her 40s named Dihar, who moved with the specific kind of unhurried efficiency that meant she had done something like this before. She crouched to Petra's level before she approached the alien. "You called it in as non-aggressive," Dihar said. "It's hiding," Petra said. "It's scared. It's hurt on its left side and one leg." Dihar looked at her for a moment. "How long have you been watching it?" "About 8 minutes. It hasn't moved. It's been watching me the whole time." And it made no threatening approach, no signal emissions, no charge-up behavior. It made a sound once. It sounded like a question. Dihar nodded slowly, the way adults do when a child has said something they didn't expect to be useful. She straightened and turned to the alien, and she did exactly what Petra had done. She crouched down, bringing herself lower, and she kept her hands visible and open. The alien looked at Dihar. Then it looked back at Petra, then at Dihar again. "That's actually helpful," Dihar said, to Petra but not taking her eyes off the alien. "It's triangulating who you are relative to us. It's trying to figure out the structure." "What do you mean?" "It's asking whether you're in charge or we are." Petra thought about that. "Tell it I'm not in charge, but tell it I'm the one who called you." Dihar produced a small device from her vest, adjusted a setting, and spoke a series of sounds that were not quite language but had the cadence of language, something pre-linguistic, tonal, designed as a contact bridge. The alien's breathing slowed slightly. It shifted its weight off the damaged leg and settled into a position that looked, if not relaxed, at least less braced for impact. "What is it?" Yusuf asked. He had come up beside Petra without her noticing. Dav and Rena were just behind him. "Don't know yet," Dihar said. "Deep Archive is running the morphology now. Whatever it is, it's not in the standard frequency registry, which means it either came from somewhere new or came from somewhere very old, and we don't have a good record." She paused. "The two vessels that swept east, your camera got them?" "Full footage," Petra said. "I started recording when I saw the first lights." "I'll need a copy of that." "You can have it." The Deep Archive response came back 20 minutes later, while the medical liaison was working on the alien's injuries. Carefully, slowly, with the creature's permission granted through a series of small accented sounds. And while Petra sat on a freight pallet with Dihar going through her footage frame by frame on a field tablet. The archive hit was partial. A morphology match to a class of vessel registry logged 41 years ago as a mid-range retrieval crew, non-military designation, origin system in the outer spiral. The two vessels that had swept and climbed away matched the hull signature for independent contractors registered under a commercial salvage designation that Earth's monitoring network had flagged on entry but not intercepted, because they had filed a transit waiver. They had filed a transit waiver and left one of their crew behind. "Commercial salvage," Dihar said. "They had permission to pass through the outer monitoring corridor. They didn't have permission to enter atmosphere." She set the tablet down. "They must have had an emergency. Maybe this one's suit failed. Maybe the vessel had a breach. Maybe they had to drop altitude fast. And when they saw how active the monitoring grid was over this region, they cut and ran." "They left it," Petra said. "They left it," Dihar confirmed. Petra looked across the freight yard to where the medical liaison was finishing the pressure wrap on the alien's injured side. The alien was sitting upright now, the fear in its posture different, still present, but no longer the paralyzed kind. It was looking around the yard with the amber eyes taking in details. The containers, the perimeter lights, the atmospheric escort still holding its patient circle overhead, calculating something. Petra recognized the look, because it was the look she gave a situation when she was trying to figure out whether it was as bad as it seemed. "It's trying to figure out what we're going to do with it," she said. "Yes," Dihar said. "What are you going to do with it?" Dihar was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what it wants. If it wants to go back to its registered system, we can arrange a transit escort. Earth has a relay contact with the outer salvage networks. If it wants protective custody while a formal inquiry is filed, that's also on the table. Either way, it doesn't get handed back to the crew that left it in a freight yard with a broken leg." Petra nodded. That seemed right. She crossed the yard and crouched down in front of the alien again, because Dihar had told her it was tracking her as a reference point, and she figured that was a useful thing to be. The amber eyes found her immediately. Up close without the camera between them, she could see the details she had cataloged through the lens but felt differently without it. The long fingers, 4 on each hand, with the extra articulation that made every movement look slightly more deliberate than human movement. The chest markings on its suit that had looked like damage from a distance, and she now understood were rank or crew insignia, some of them scratched out or overwritten. The way it held perfectly still when she looked at it directly, the way a creature holds still when it is deciding whether to trust something. She held her hand out palm up, not reaching toward it, just offering. It looked at her hand for a long time. Then, very slowly, it placed one of its own hands over hers, not gripping, not pressing. Just resting there. The 4 long fingers covered her palm completely. They were warm. "Okay," she said, "we're going to sort this out." Dav was the one who said it later, when they were all sitting in the back of the liaison vehicle while the formal handoff protocols ran. He said it the way he said most things, sideways, half looking out the window, as if he had thought about it more than he planned to admit. It was scared of us, he said. The whole time, it came down here and it was terrified. Yeah, Petra said. That's kind of wild, he said. We've got the whole orbital grid and the warships and everything, and something comes here scared. It came here because it had nowhere else to go, Rena said. I know, Dav said. That's what's wild about it. Petra looked at the footage on her camera, the amber lights descending, the shape pressed against the container wall, the enormous eyes looking at her over the lens. She thought about what it meant that the thing had come down here alone and hurt and been found by 4 kids with a tripod and a comet chart. She thought about how the alien had looked when it covered her hand with its own. Not grateful, exactly. Relieved. The specific kind of relieved you feel when something you were afraid of turns out to be what you hoped it might be. She saved the footage in 3 separate places and filed the primary copy to EDWatch before she went home. The comet, when she finally looked up, was already past its window. But the sky was still full of things worth filming.